الله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونستهديه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا. من يهدي الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له. ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له ونشهد أن محمدًا عبده ورسوله. سيد المرسلين وخاتم النبيين ورحمة للعالمين، وصلى الله على آله الطاهرين الذين أذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا. أوصيكم عباد الله ونفسي بتقوى الله. At the first khutbah, I would like to briefly talk about Hazrat Abu Talib, keeping in mind that today is the day of the wafat of Hazrat Abu Talib, the uncle of the Prophet and the father of Amir al-Mu'mineen. After the passing away of the grandfather of the Prophet, when the Prophet was still very young, his uncle Abu Talib became the guardian and the custodian of the Prophet, and he raised him and protected him as his own son. When the Prophet started his mission at the age of 40 and started calling people towards Islam, Abu Talib was fully supportive of his work. He used his prestige as the chief of the people of Mecca in order to protect the Prophet from any physical attack by the mushrikeen. They did not dare touch him physically as long as Abu Talib was alive. And we see that it was only after his passing away that this whole plan of assassination was basically worked on, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then commanded him to migrate from Mecca towards Medina. The support of the Prophet by Abu Talib can be seen in his works as well as his words, very clearly portraying him as a mu'min, believer in the Islamic faith. Yet we see that, in history, later, towards the end of the Umayyad era and later on, even during the time of Abbasid, historians started emphasizing this point that Abu Talib, he was a good man, he did this and that, but he was a kafir. He died as a kafir. وَمَاتَ كَافِرًا. This is where they will always end those two words at the end of their description. And when you ask them why, they say, well, we haven't heard him. There is no narration saying that he recited the kalima, shahadatain. If that is the criteria, many Muslims in the early days would be out of it, because we don't have much testimony about many of them. This is where we have to realize, besides this point of taqiyya, that Abu Talib basically was exercising taqiyya in order to use his position in the society to protect the Prophet. Very similar to this story in the Quran, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about mu'minun min ali Fir'aun, that there was a mu'min, a believer from the family of Fir'aun. The surah is named as Surah Mu'min or Surah Ghafir, two different names for the same surah. And so he was basically, mu'min in that from Banu Hashim. And as far as the words are concerned, you don't necessarily need the words Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. Abu Talib himself was a poet. And if you look at the poetry which has survived till now, basically there is more than enough there to express his, belief in the Prophet. For example, just, 2, 3 lines. In one, he says, "منعنا الرسول رسول الملك ببيض تلألأ كلمع البروق." We defended the messenger of the king, referring to Allah, with bright sword which shine like lightning. And so he's talking about, we defended him, and he's, Rasulul Malik, referring to the messenger of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then he says, أضب وأحمي رسول الملك حماية حان عليه شفيق. I defend and protect the messenger of the king, protection of a guardian who is affectionate to him. The most important line there is at the end where he says, ألم تعلموا أن وجدنا محمد نبيا كموسى خط في أول الكتب. He says, do you not know that we found Muhammad, a prophet like Musa? It is written in earlier books. So Abu Talib was not only a poet in his own right, he was in a way, familiar and alim of the earlier books, where he says, I saw the name of Muhammad mentioned in the earlier books as a Nabi like Musa alayhi salam. And this is where we have to realize that, the only fault of Abu Talib is that he was father of Ali. This whole issue in history has come up because he is father of Ali. They are comparing Ali alayhi salam on one side, Muawiyah on the other side. And then you have Abu Sufyan there, who became, Muslim under duress and pressure during the last days of the Prophet. And then you have Abu Talib on the other side. They want to basically diminishing their status. Especially when we look at when the Quraysh finally, came to him with an ultimatum that either you lift your support for your nephew so that we can deal with him directly, or if you don't agree with that, then we will impose socio-economic boycott on you and the entire Banu Hashim clan. Abu Talib, from the worldly point of view, he said, why would I like to put the entire Banu Hashim into problem? He decided to look at the decision of the Prophet, and this is where we see, he agreed to support the Prophet, even though, he went through suffering. 3 years of socio-economic boycott took its toll, and soon after that, he actually passed away, as well as Bibi Khadija. Even in his deathbed, basically, he advised his relatives, especially emphasizing the point that support the Prophet in his cause. When you study the history of Islam, at least for the 8 decades of the early history, you will see that whenever true Islam needed help and sacrifice, the people who came forward to sacrifice were all from the descendants of Abu Talib and Fatima bint Asad. Even when we talk about the events of Karbala, normally all the khutaba and the orators, when they talk about the martyrs of Karbala, they divide them into two groups. They say Ashab of Hussein and Banu Hashim, the Shuhada of Banu Hashim. Actually, even that term, Banu Hashim, should be even further restricted. Because those members from Banu Hashim who were killed in Karbala, all of them were from Ali, Abi Talib, and Fatima bint Asad. There was no one from other lines of Banu Hashim. And this is where we see that, his sincerity, and that of his wife Fatima bint Asad continued in the blood of their descendants. And this is where we see that, Even Ibn Abi al-Hadid al-Mu'tazili, a Sunni commentator of Nahj al-Balagha, he actually, in his poetry, he talks about the role of Abu Talib, where he says, وَلَوْلَا أَبُو طَالِبْ وَابْنَهُ لَمَا مَثَّلَ الدِّينُ شَخْصًا فَقَامًا. He says, if it had not been for Abu Talib and his son, Islam would not have been shaped rightfully, or would stood up, right. فَذَاكَ بِمَكَّةَ آوَى وَحَامَى وَهَذَا بِيَثْرِي جَسَّ الْحِمَامَ. This one, referring to the father, he provided help and protection in Mecca, and the other one, referring to the son, he rubbed shoulders with death in Medina. And so we see even, those who were not biased, they also, recognize the contribution of Abu Talib. The lesson that we can derive from Abu Talib, especially his spirit of sacrifice for the right cause, is basically even to go through the suffering during the time of sanctions and boycotts. And this is not only a historical issue, it's even now. We should be wise in facing the challenges and support the people in their suffering. This is something, of course, it's beyond our control, but, the people in power have to really do whatever they can to relieve the suffering of the people, especially, these kinds of issues initially happens because of very natural issues, but then it is politicized and enemies would come in, exploit this situation. And as our Maraja and Qawm have again and again mentioned to the officials, that you must very diligently work hard to relieve the financial burden from the common people. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give the tawfiq to the Muslims and the Shias around the world to fulfill their duties in the best of manner, inshallah. إن أحسن الحديث كتاب الله العزيز بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله الذي لا إله إلا هو الحليم الكريم غافر الذنب وقابل التوبة وهو الغفور الرحيم ونشهد أن لا إله إلا هو العطوف للعباد بجوده والعواد على المذنبين بحلمه ونشهد أن محمدا نبيه وحبيبه سيد المرسلين وشفيع المذنبين ورحمة للعالمين صلى الله عليه وآله الداعين إلى سبيل الله بالحكمة والموعظة الحسنة قادة الأمم وأولياء النعمة ومعدن رحمة أوصيكم عباد الله بتوبة من سلف من ذنوبكم. We are going through very precarious times, at the helm of the superpower that we have now is a person who is unpredictable, has no regard for international laws, admires strong and authoritarian leaders, want to become one of them, and is willing to unleash the U.S. military might abroad whenever, wherever he thinks, he has a choice. But the most astonishing statement of President Trump is about Greenland. He says that U.S. needs to own it, to defend it. This is, the irony there. We need to own it in order to defend it against possible Russian or Chinese, attack. Greenland is linked to Denmark. Denmark is a member of NATO alliance. If Greenland or any other member of NATO alliance is really threatened by Russian or Chinese attack, it's the duty of U.S. and other NATO members to defend them. But he is not talking about in that logical sense, legal sense. He said, for me to defend it, I must own it. You see, it was a real estate business. It says you cannot defend your lease, you can defend ownership. Well, you know, this is not your property anyway. And if they're not willing to sell it, they are not willing to sell it. And so this is a very crooked way of thinking that if Russia or China plans to take Greenland, therefore I will take it. You know, in Indian politics recently, a statement has come up, Chokidar hi chor nikla. You understand what I mean? Chokidar hi chor nikla means the watchman turned out to be the thief. Because you are the most powerful member of NATO alliance. You are supposed to be the one who will defend Greenland if China or Russia attacks. But instead of defending, I'll say, I'll take it. Because it's for grabs there, then I'll take it. And this is a very crooked way of looking at things. You know, before warning other countries about brutal repression of protesters, the U.S. should look at itself. The way the ICE police officer shot an American lady this week would not committed any crime. There were all different ways of stopping her. You could have even just shot at the tires to stop the car or something, you know, just shooting her directly and killing her. And then justifying that also. Government has been justifying. And now the president is also, you know, for these kinds of protests there in different cities in America, he calls in National Guard, and now he's threatening to invoke the Insurrection Act to bring in the military to deal with the American people. You know, I think such people should stop preaching others about it and look at themselves first. You know, I was just looking at the editorial of the Guardian newspaper where they had a description that said, you know, Trump's method is madness. I think that was a very simple way of putting it. When you look at the Islamic akhlaqi analysis, this is an example of somebody driven by an extreme greed for wealth and fame, and nothing is. And this is where, you know, we come to this issue. Sometimes we think if we have knowledge, if we have education, everything will be fine. And I'm not against this issue of, you know, having better schools and things like that. But I have a problem when people think this is the solution to everything. I know even some of the senior, thinkers and ulama, even in India, have been talking about it. And it's very important for the Muslims and the Shias to reach to the higher level of education. But sometimes the focus is only on that. You know, the element of akhlaq is forgotten. They say, Maulana, kya farq hai ki wo hijab pehen ke aaye ya na aaye? You know, why should we insist that they should also come to our schools and learn Islamic teachings? You know, many times when we have this school here, there are many visitors who have come from Shia, areas where they said, we are surprised that you have, Islamic, relatively much better Islamic environment. We are talking about Islamic curriculum, which is part of the education. Because many, even Shia institutions in other parts of the world, they focus more on the academics so that our children may succeed. And I don't have a problem with that. I think every Islamic school should excel above the normal standard of the school systems. But don't forget the akhlaq. What is America, lacking? Is it education? Is it wealth? Is it number of people? No, they have all these things. But then it is this moral and ethics that even though you have a system there, somebody can come in and mess everything up. Taking over the authority even from the Congress. And you can't do anything. And this is where we have to realize that for true success of any society, akhlaqi values moral and ethics are absolutely essential. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the tawfiq to understand the true values of Islam and be among the true followers of Muhammad and Ali Muhammad. اللهم صل على سيد المرسلين وشفيع المذنبين نبينا محمد صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم وعلى إمام المتقين وأمير المؤمنين علي بن أبي طالب صلوات الله عليه وعلى سيدة نساء العالمين سيدتنا فاطمة بنت رسول الله صلوات الله عليها وعلى سيد الشباب أهل الجنة الحسن المجتبى والحسين الشهيد بكربلاء عليهم الصلاة والسلام والأئمة المسلمين علي بن الحسين ومحمد بن علي وجعفر بن محمد وموسى بن جعفر وعلي بن موسى ومحمد بن علي وعلي بن محمد والحسن بن علي عليهم الصلاة والسلام. اللهم صل على مولانا الحجة بن الحسن صاحب العصر والزمان ماحي آثار البدء والطغيان هادم أبنية الشرك والنفاق حاصل فل البغي والشقاق صلوات الله وسلامه عليه وعلى آبائه الكرام ما اتصلت الليالي والأيام. اللهم عجل فرج وسهل مخرجه واكحل ناظرنا بنظرة منا إليه واجعلنا من المستشهدين بين يديه. اللهم اجعلنا ممن يذكر فتنفعه الذكرى. إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون.